Today's the day, Broncos country. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chad Sports. Training camp has officially begun, so you could expect fully daily videos covering all of the favorite players and the ongoings at Broncos training camp. Little Birdie even told me that Diana Rossini might be out there covering some Broncos training camp coverage. And make sure, if you haven't already, join the family by liking the video and hitting that subscribe button. It helps grow the channel. So let's talk about the most recent article and the main reason for this pre-training camp video. This is the last pre-training camp video that we're going to do before we go live today at 4 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Mountain Time. ESPN listed the starters and ranked all of the starting lineups for not only the Broncos, but all 32 NFL teams. They projected those lineups with their strength, their weakness, and the X factors, so we'll get into that here in just a little bit as the show goes on. But they do have the Broncos listed as the 6th NFL lineup, starting lineup, per ESPN. So let's take a look at the full roster rankings before we give you the projected starters from our friends over at the most trusted news and sports entertainment outlet. Yeah, I know. Producer Alper's giving me the El Pshaw because everybody knows Chat Sports is great. Baltimore Ravens coming in at 1, Philadelphia Eagles at 2, Detroit Lions, Buffalo Bills. The Chiefs, who we'll touch on here in just a second, come in at 5. The Broncos at number 6, followed by Washington and the Rams. We're going to speed through the next couple of ones. Cincinnati coming in at number 9, which is kind of crazy considering their defense sucks. And then majority of the NFC North, Vikings, Packers, Bears, 11, 14, and 15, followed by Arizona at 17. The Cowboys coming in at 18. The Patriots at 21. Jags at 22. The Dolphins coming in at 24. And look at that, the Raiders even got a little bump. And then the bottom of the barrel looks like this. Colts, 25. Falcons, 26. The Giants at 27. And rounding out the very end, the worst roster, according to ESPN, the New Orleans Saints, who, by the way, I have said is going to be the worst team in the NFL. And it's not going to be close. They're going to win like 2 to 3 games, maybe. So let's go back to the Broncos for a second. 6th feels like a pretty decent spot. On the one hand, almost all of the major outlets have ranked the Broncos defense number 1 or number 2, and a lot of people have the Broncos offense hovering right around 10 to 15, somewhere in that range. So 6th feels like a pretty decent spot. However, the Chiefs at 5, I got to disagree a little bit. I'm not saying the Chiefs deserve to be outside of the top 10 because you don't win 3 Super Bowls having a outside of the top 10 roster. But I don't think it's as good as the Broncos. I think somewhere between 7 and 10 is most likely where I'd have the Chiefs, considering they have great players, individual players, but the team as a whole, I don't think is better than the Broncos. Neither here nor there. We're picking at hairs right now. So here is the projected starting lineups that ESPN gave for the Broncos. Pretty straightforward, right? There's not too many issues, or I don't even want to call it issues, surprises, really, except for one on offense and one on defense. Pat Bryant instead of Devon Vele on offense. And get this, Jaquan McMillan over Riley Moss. Or Jahdae Barron over Riley Moss, whichever way you want to look at it. But Bryant over Vele, I'm okay with that. That's totally fine by me. If Pat Bryant has been balling out during rookie minicamps and OTAs and mandatory minicamp, I have no qualms with that whatsoever. May the best man win. Jaquan McMillan or Jahdae Barron over Riley Moss sounds a little bit out there to me. Now, that doesn't mean that Jahdae Barron is worse than Riley Moss or Jaquan McMillan is worse than Riley Moss, but the way that I thought it would go would be Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, and Jahdae Barron, with Jaquan McMillan taking the backseat to Jahdae, who primarily plays the nickel corner spot. But then again, ESPN could be getting this wrong. They're wrong all the time about stuff. So if I had to give my starting cornerbacks right this moment before training camp actually begins, it'd be Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, and Jahdae Barron at the nickel corner spot. But again, that's just me. My guess is as good as yours. We'll obviously see come week 1 when the starters roll out if it's as predicted by ESPN or if it's a little bit closer to what Moose has to say. Now, as I mentioned before, the article goes on to list 3 other categories: the biggest strength, the biggest weakness, and the X factor of each team, or X factors. Sometimes they list more than one. In the Broncos' case, they started with the biggest strength being the offensive line. And I was a little surprised about this, not because I don't think the Broncos' offensive line is bad or not as good, but the pass rush is clearly, in my opinion, the best in the NFL, their biggest strength. Here's what ESPN defended their answer with. This was an easy call after the Broncos led the NFL in both pass block and run block win rate in 2024. Denver returns all 5 starters from that unit, all of whom played 800-plus snaps last season. Bowles, Powers, Wattenberg, Miners, and Mike McGlinchey each posted a pass block win rate well above league average. Incredibly, Wattenberg, who was first, Miners, who was third, and Powers, who was fourth, all ranked in the top 4 league-wide in that category. Now, we knew the Broncos' offensive line was good. There's no doubt about that. But the way that ESPN justifies it kind of breathes new life into my opinion of this Broncos offensive line. I never thought they were bad. I just always thought they were top 10, but never this good, because there's a lot of other analytics sites out there that say the Broncos have the second best offensive line in the entire NFL, only behind the Philadelphia Eagles. So if it was my opinion, I'd say it was the pass rush that was their biggest strength. But you know what? I'll take it. I'm not going to complain about it at all. If you told me that going into 2025, the Broncos were going to dominate the NFL on the offensive line and the defensive line, that's a recipe for making the Super Bowl. And you can bet twice on that. So I want you to grade the Broncos offensive line for me. A, B, C, D, or F. Become the teacher. Take out your red pen, scribble some notes, and let me know what you think. If I had to give my answer right now, I'd say the worst you could go is about an A-. That's about as low as I'd be willing to go. Either way, let me know in the comment section down below. Okay, let's go to the X factors next, because most of the time you go strength, weakness, then X factor. I kind of wanted to do things a little bit differently, kind of make some waves here. So let's start with the X factor, who ESPN lists as Marvin Mims. And the more and more I started thinking about it, the more and more I was kind of like, you know what? They've kind of got a point. Here's how they defended their answer on Marvin Mims. They said, as Mike just alluded to it, Marvin Mims is the X factor after he recorded a very efficient 2.8 yards per route run last season. But that was on only 182 routes. If Mims could become a more reliable traditional wide receiver and maintain a reasonably high efficiency, it would help solve the aforementioned wide receiver weakness. Spoiler alert, the biggest weakness for the Broncos is their wide receiver group. But I do want to at least kind of deep dive into the analytics. So he only had 182 routes run, and he only had 52 targets last season. So what does that tell you? His route running wasn't nearly as crisp or defined as it needed to be. The route tree just wasn't there. But out of those 52 targets, 20 of those out of the 52 were screen passes. So they were getting him way too involved at the line of scrimmage, where he does have some success. So don't take it out of his game. But that means the other 32 were your regular standard routes, which is not nearly enough. So now that I look at the Broncos depth chart, the more and more I'm starting to think Marvin Mims might be the one that takes the next step. I know that I've been pushing Devon Vele over Marvin Mims, but the reason I do that is because Sean Payton has put such an emphasis on the big-bodied, silky smooth wide receivers. It's his prototype. But Marvin Mims, being the speedster that he is, if he can clean up the route running, if he can make it a little bit more crisp off the line of scrimmage and find ways to use his hands and his speed to gain even more separation, you might be looking at the next standout player for the Denver Broncos at wide receiver. It could be a 1-2 punch of Courtland Sutton and Marvin Mims. Make no mistake about it. So if you think that Marvin Mims is in for a big year, make sure you like today's video if you haven't already. I think he's in for an explosive year, not only on special teams, but as a wide receiver as well. Now, before we get into the weaknesses, because you can't talk about the strengths without talking about the weaknesses, do me a favor. Back by popular demand, the Broncos hoodie has made its return. Notice I'm wearing some Broncos garb today, my new Denver Broncos blackout hat. Unfortunately, they are out of stock right now on Fanatics for this Broncos hat. I know, thumbs down. However, they have other great Broncos gear that I have also purchased, like this right here. So I went out, got the Broncos hoodie, super comfortable, conforms to your body well. I know a lot of people are like, ooh, it's super bright and loud. It's not nearly as bright as you think. It's kind of more of a faded color. But I did you a solid here. What I did is I took the link for this hoodie and I put it in the second paragraph of today's description. I also put it in the comment section for you as well. So if you want to start shopping for not only this hoodie, but any more Broncos gear like this hat, this hoodie, t-shirts, gloves, etc., do it with the link that we provided in the description, second paragraph, and the comments of today's video. Last but not least, the biggest weakness, the wide receivers. And I think they got this wrong. Not because of their choice, because you can think that the biggest weakness is the wide receivers. It's their reasoning why they chose the wide receivers that I disagree with slightly. It's because they're more unknown. Here's what they had to say. It's tough to find a major concern area, so we'll pick one unit that still has something to prove. Look at that. I was correct. Cortland Sutton had a career-high 81 catches last year, which was terrific, but it's yet to be seen who will emerge as the consistent target behind him. The top candidates at wide receiver 2 are 2023 second-round pick Marvin Mims and guys like Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, and Pat Bryant. Now, again, I'm going to push back just a little bit. I don't think you can necessarily say the biggest weakness is because they're so unproven. I think, in my opinion, that leaves a ton of room for explosive growth. So I can't be the one that says it's a big weakness because nobody knows. That's not how I would work. The biggest weakness that I would say would be the depth at linebacker, because outside of the guys that we've brought in to start, they have major injury concerns. So if any of those guys go down, who's your depth coming in to replace them? That would be my biggest concern. Or the tight end room. Because again, outside of Evan Ingram, the Broncos don't really have nearly as much talent as they would like. But let's go back to the wide receivers for a second. Did you know that Denver was 1-6 in one-score games last year, partially due to inexperienced weapons? So what's the main thing that the Broncos were great at last year? It was getting to the quarterback. So clearly, defensively, they were doing their job. But if you go 1-6 in one-score games, it leads me to believe you're not scoring nearly enough points, unless every single game is a shootout, which all Broncos fans know last year, it wasn't. So partially due to the inexperience at wide receiver, there was a bunch of really young players last year that were just finding their footing in the NFL. So last year, the wide receivers ranked 24th out of 32. What's that going to be in 2025? Nobody knows. I would love to assume that it's going to be a hell of a lot higher than 24, considering now we have a tight end in Evan Ingram who's going to eat a majority of snaps, leading more coverage to go towards him and younger wide receivers to get open more frequently. But I also found this to kind of back up my claim. I know how much you guys love a good flow chart, so I decided to go find one that I believe perfectly encapsulates the biggest problem with the Broncos offense last year. Not the running, not the lack of tight end, but that kind of comes into play with both of these. Do you notice anything, Producer Alper, on this? Just quick thoughts?
They don't throw deep whatsoever.
They don't throw deep whatsoever. Look at the heat chart. Look at the results by location chart, and look at the success rate by location chart. Do you notice anything missing here? I'll spoil it for you. There's no success throwing the ball deep. Now, whether that be a lack of talent from what your wide receivers or a lack of getting open, or Bo Nix just early on not being able to connect on the deep ball. Either way, that was a major area of concern for the Broncos last year, is not being able to stretch the field. So when you could stretch the field more, gain more chunk plays, you're going to be put in position to score more. It's just the law of football. Throw a little bit deeper ball, connect on it, you're that much closer to kicking a field goal or making a touchdown, or scoring a touchdown, excuse me. That sounded terrible. But it also leads me to this point. With more play action comes more deep shots. That all ties together the Broncos' weaknesses last year, the run game and the tight end. If you have a stronger run game, you can utilize the play action more frequently. And once you do, your wide receivers can stretch the field, and if they're not open, utilize your tight end that gets open more frequently, like Evan Ingram. It all bleeds together. So, with this being said, the additions of J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, and Evan Ingram should automatically make the Broncos' offense and their wide receivers and Bo Nix more efficient. Before we end today's video, reminder that we are going to be live on today at 4 o'clock Central Time, 3 p.m. Mountain Time. So make sure that if you haven't already, like the video and subscribe. Join the Broncos Breakdown family, where we will be covering every single day of Broncos training camp and beyond. My name is Moose. Until next time, be cool.